So you're interested in Baliem Valley? Okay. Now this is more of a video essay rather than a travel guide, so if you're after practical info, just use the links in the description to jump to the last section. And if you want to learn about what makes Papua and Baliem Valley special, about history, local customs and fruits, parachuting priests and local psychoactive substances, just blow through the entire video. Okay, so where do we start? 60 million years ago, the collision of Pacific and Australian plates lifted up a huge chunk of land that we now call Papua. In geological terms, this makes Papua a very young island. When you look at the peaks of Papuan highlands, you can still clearly see the pieces of bedrock that were pushed up against each other. While we consider Papua to be part of the Malay archipelago, geologically and biologically it's more connected to Australia. So the indigenous animals here are crocodiles, wallabies, tree kangaroos, cassowaries, bats, hornbills, harpy eagles, birds of paradise, and a ton of leeches and mosquitoes, and the cuscus, cute marsupial ewoks. Pigs, dogs and cats were brought here by humans. The first humans arrived in Papua 40,000 years ago, most likely via a land bridge from Australia. So most of the current inhabitants of Papua are more related to the Australian Aborigines rather than the Asians. This is a big divide, fueling the separatist movement in the Indonesian West Papua. 33,000 years after coming here, the Papuans did something remarkable. They independently invented agriculture. Papuan Highlands is one of only 7 to 10 places around the world where it happened, so this is really a big deal. First, they domesticated taro. My friend from Vietnam described taro as a violet potato, and that's the best description ever. They also domesticated a few varieties of Pandanus, like karuka. It has fruits that consist of a few hundred of nut-like kernels, sort of like a 3D sunflower. They have a nutty taste with a bit of anise note, very interesting and extremely nutritious. Another type of Pandanus common in Papua is what I would call the WTF fruit, Papuan red Pandanus. They are massive, around a meter long, and they grow in a cocoon of sharp, paper-cut-inducing leaves. Papuans use them to make oil, which is said to be rich in vitamins A and D. As for taste, it's similar to sunflower oil. Locals call them Marata, Kansu, Buamera or Sak, depending on the language. Since humans have lived here for very long, in valleys separated by high mountains, Papua is one of the most linguistically diverse places in the world, with over 800 languages of 60 families spoken on a territory the size of Spain. Ancient Papuans also cultivated the plants that we all know and love. Bananas and sugarcane both were domesticated here around 7,000 years ago. They also domesticated sago, palm-like trees grown for their starchy trunks, used to make tapioca-like mash. While it's often said that Papuans lived uncontacted for millennia, we know that they did trade with Asia. Domesticated banana trees and sago plants were exported from Papua to Borneo, Sri Lanka and beyond around 6,000 years ago. Trade also went in the opposite direction. Dogs were brought to Papua via Australia around 8,000 years ago. A bigger cultural exchange happened later when Austronesians reached Papua 3,000 years ago on their way to conquering the Pacific. They taught the locals pottery and brought pigs. Pigs became a keystone animal in Papuan culture. Wealth is measured by the number of pigs you own, and the local legends end with, and they killed a lot of pigs and they had a great feast, instead of the happy ever after. Austronesians also brought betel nuts, called pinang in Papua, and this is a really interesting rabbit hole to dive into. Pinang nuts contain arecolin, a psychoactive nicotine-like substance. Its effects are similar to a cup of coffee, but instead of the heart pounding and anxiety, you are chill and relaxed and maybe even euphoric. In general, it's very pleasant. I'd give it like a solid 7 out of 10, but there's always a but. To try pinang, you need to buy a set. A few nuts, a Ziploc bag of white powder, and some lime branches. The first problem is that you have to chew on these nuts, and they are pretty tough. And as you crack them, they turn red. So far, this is nothing out of the ordinary nut chewing, but now your mouth gets numb, and this is really unpleasant. Now you need to spit the red ooze out and eat a bit of chalk. I'm not making this up, the white powder is actually chalk. The chalk will unnumb your mouth, and then you will be ready to take a bite of the lime branch to kill the aftertaste. So the process is a little bit complicated. Other downsides are that the effects don't last that long, over a few years your teeth will turn red, and the risk of oral cancer increases a lot. So if you were wondering why the locals have red teeth and can carry bags of sweet potato up the mountains sunrise to sunset, here is a 2-in-1 answer. This also explains why there are a lot of do not spit signs in hotels and restaurants, and a lot of tiny Ziploc bags on the ground everywhere, with an occasional puddle of red ooze. Pinang was once popular across Asia, from China to Pakistan. It gradually became an old people drug in most places except Papua, Bangladesh and parts of Laos. The staple food in the Papuan highlands is the sweet potato. It was first domesticated in the highlands of Ecuador, conditions almost identical to Baliem Valley. Europeans brought it to Papua in the 17th century and it has taken root here very quickly. Its cultivation was similar to taro, but unlike taro, pigs could eat sweet potatoes uncooked. Sweet potato replaced taro in most Papuan legends, with some tribes even openly denying any potato-free past. All those cultural and technological exchanges happened by diffusion rather than direct contact. It wasn't that Australasian traders directly brought pigs to the Papuan highlands. Pigs, sweet potatoes, and later papayas, avocados, jackfruit, carrots, and so on were passed from tribe to tribe, finally reaching even the most impenetrable highlands. Apart from those new crops and animals, life in places like Baliem Valley remained largely unchanged from the late Stone Age into the early 1960s. The 75 kilometers long Grand Valley is carved by the Baliem River, a massive mountain stream that is still actively eroding the highlands, taking down houses, roads and bridges every year. The bottom of the valley sits at 1800 meters, higher than most alpine ski resort towns, and its peaks reach about the same height as the tops of the ski lifts there. So the scale of the mountain slopes, or as the locals call it, mountain walls, is just breathtaking. The climate is surprisingly friendly. It's the equator, but the high altitude keeps the temperature low at about 20 degrees, and there's a lot of rainfall. So what you get is like a nice, endless, wet European summer. The Baliem Valley has two main parts: the flat area north of Wamena and the uplands in the south. The flatlands are mostly settled by the Yali people. They grow sweet potatoes in fields with intricate irrigation systems, and they also use the local salt springs to make salt. Until recently, salting was the only way to preserve food around here. They soak thin layers of banana stems in the salty water and later dry them in the sun. As for the uplands, farming is always harder in the mountains. The terrain here is steep and the soil is stony, so people clear the rocks from relatively flat areas to create terraced gardens. And once you have all those rocks, why not use them to build a wall around the garden? It will keep the pigs out. Or in. Those walls look like mazes. You can find similar landscape in Ireland, where the same practice started with the Sede fields around 5,000 years ago. Combine that with the mountains, and if it reminds you of Machu Picchu, you're onto something. Both were built by equatorial, alpine, sweet potato farmers. Just replace the coca leaves with pinang nuts. If you look carefully, you will notice that the mountain walls are all etched with those stone walls. On the left bank of the river, nearly every patch of usable land is either a currently cultivated garden or an inactive one, left dormant to let the soil rest. Effectively, over thousands of years, those gardens became a megastructure, someone called the History Channel. Until the 1960s, the locals were using only wooden and stone tools, putting them in the pottery Neolithic status, basically a proto-civilization, a notch below the Varna culture or the Omlex in Mexico. Each Baliem Valley village consists of a few sali, a kind of sub-villages. A sali consists of a men's hut, a few women huts, and a communal building. There were separate huts for men and women because women were considered impure, and visiting was limited even after marriage. In case of a death of a husband or a child, a woman was expected to cut off a piece of her ear or a finger as an expression of grief. This custom is fading, but you can still find women with mama hands. A sali usually owns a few gardens, and while a sali has a chief, the crops are shared without the concept of personal ownership. If one tribe messes with another tribe's fields, a war starts. Wars involved ritualized pitched battles, where the warriors would hurl stones, insults and arrows at one another until a few of them were killed or seriously wounded. There were also raids and ambushes aimed at stealing pigs or killing warriors as a part of vendetta. War also served as a way to reduce the number of men. Papuans practiced polygamy, so there were just not enough wives to go around. Papuan traditional dress is pretty basic, with the most distinct elements being the nose ornaments made from pig bone and of course the koteka, a penis guard made from a fire-dried gourd. Baliem Valley is extremely inaccessible. Even today, Wamena is accessible pretty much only by airplane, and that's how the proto-civilization of the Baliem Valley was discovered in 1938. The first long-term contact with the outside world was established in 1953 when a Christian missionary literally came down from the sky on a parachute. In the 1960s, Baliem Valley attracted ethnographers interested in exploring and documenting the Neolithic society here before it got contaminated by external influences. Wamena already had a functioning airport at that moment, so it was only a matter of time. This resulted in a lot of fascinating books and documentaries, but also a lot of generalizations which make learning the truth about Papua very hard. The legends and misunderstandings are mixing with the history, and the tourism isn't exactly helping, as news stories, usually ones involving cannibalism, are fabricated to attract more visitors. Flying from Jakarta to Jayapura gives you the sailing up the Congo vibes from Heart of Darkness. The city is much less developed, chaotic, and far from clean. There is a beautiful lake next to the city, but swimming is not recommended due to crocodiles. A massive jungle encroaches on the hills around the city as if it was an active siege. Papuan airlines are adding their part. It's a poor region, so although airplanes are the main mode of transport here, their average age is around 40. You can see a lot of investment being put into airports, but investments don't fix the processes. Most of our flights were either delayed or cancelled. Flying to Wamena is an experience on its own. The landing approach is between the mountains, so you can either call it beautiful or terrifying, depending on how much you fear flying. The city itself? The people are friendly, but visually, it gives you total third world vibes minus the hunger. Chaos, trash, especially plastic, on the streets, trash on fire, people riding on car roofs and military presence everywhere. With this trajectory, how bad will it get when you reach an almost Stone Age area? Actually, it gets amazing. Spectacular mountains, ridges, streams and waterfalls. Bigger rivers slowly chew away at the landscape. Clean, well-maintained trails and walled terrace gardens. Villages are well planned, clean, beautiful, and efficient in their design. They are surrounded with waist-high, dry stone walls and tiny ladders that function as wickets. The first sali we visited had a private stream, a few banana, tangerine, and pandanus trees, and a walled-off orchard along the stream, with this guy in charge of weed control and fertilizing. Essentially a free-range pig pen with a roofed house and running water. Just look at this happy fellow, what could ever go wrong for him? There are a lot of tourist-targeted traditional villages across Southeast Asia. They are more like open-air museums, picturing some idealized version of the past. But not here. This is real. Villages usually have one or two more or less modern buildings used for communal purposes and a few traditional huts. While most people wear modern clothes, you can still occasionally bump into somebody wearing traditional ones. The locals are still living mostly a sustainable lifestyle. Beside modern clothes, iron pots, tools, a car battery, solar panel, smartphone, and a few light bulbs, they produce everything they need. If the rest of the world disappeared tomorrow, they could just probably shrug it off. Still, as long as the world is here, they need money. So, if they have something for sale, it's a nice idea to buy a koteka or a wristband. I bought one, but it's too small. I'm not bragging, just saying. Standing in the Sali courtyard, between the huts and the pandan trees, with the majestic mountain walls with terraced gardens behind and in front of me, and the roaring river somewhere far below, with the evening mist creeping in, I felt like I found paradise lost. Climbing the mountains to work the fields every day. Yes, life is hard here, but it's also simple, noble, and predictable. This whole Stone Age thing isn't as bad as it's wrapped up to be. I had this feeling that we must have gone wrong somewhere and maybe we missed out on a simpler, more balanced way of life. If you can relate, you should definitely visit.
Sorry. Okay, buka pintu dulu. Okay. This is your phone, brother. Okay.
Could I leave behind Asian food, YouTube, electric guitars, indoor plumbing and just live here? Yes, but it's just a matter of specific moment in time. A few decades ago, the risk of death from infection or a tribe war was significant. A few decades from now, and it's likely that the villages here will look just like those in the lowlands. After leaving Baliem Valley, we went to Mamberamo lowlands. After a short flight and a 3-hour boat ride, we landed in a riverside village. Now, coming from Baliem Valley, this felt like the heart of darkness, like mini Wamena, Koyaanisqatsi. We asked our guide why one of those places seems so much more civilized than the other, and he said, "Oh yes, this place is much more civilized than Baliem Valley." And on paper, he was right. We had 5G, we had electricity, there was a river with a lot of boats passing by, and villagers had motorbikes. But we meant the exact opposite. So what did we mean by civilized? It all sort of clicked the next day when we went to a jungle camp. Again, on paper we were in a place that is as wild as it gets, with just a few pots, a tarp, a tent and a few machetes. But again, it felt more harmonious and, however crazy that sounds, more civilized than the riverside village. Throughout human history, technology changes first and societies adapt later. So, some communities get caught in a state where the old ways no longer work, but the new ways are not there yet. For example, banana leaves were used for wrapping food across Southeast Asia. You can just unwrap your rice cake, throw away the banana leaf, and it will decompose. Try doing that with plastic, and you have a huge pile of trash. Society will learn how to deal with that eventually, but until then, it's just lying on the ground or floating in the rivers. So Baliem Valley seemed more civilized because mature Stone Age beats undercooked modernity. Our societies have similar problems. We have targeted media destabilizing our democracies and even our dating scene. And we are about to get hit with a tidal wave of AI with no clear economic or social solution in sight. In that riverside village, you can find people who, within the span of their lives, witnessed brain-bashing methods evolve from a stone axe to AI-generated videos on TikTok. So the problem is magnified and more visible there. And the disruption is slowly creeping into the Baliem Valley. One of the sections we visited had a freshly built road. Accessible for 4x4s only, but you can make it to Wamena in hours instead of a day. Village people like it. It makes it much easier to sell their crops in the Wamena market. Of course, the river is putting up some resistance. It washes away the bridges and widens the gorges, but villages once accessible only by airstrips are getting connected to the bloodstream of modernity, for better and for worse. And flowing in are the new religions, mostly Christianity as Islam doesn't catch on due to the pigs, processed food, medicine, education, and of course those tourists and their fat wallets. So go ahead, buy that koteka, you're helping. And if you want to visit the Paradise Lost, hurry up, you might just miss it. Now here's some essential travel info. Find the local guide before coming to Papua. He will organize food, potters, accommodations in the villages, and he will be your translator. He will also help you with getting the travel permit. The government is keeping an eye on journalists and scientists entering the area, so don't count on slipping by. You will be monitored. You will need to fly to Wamena. It's relatively safe, but there is a little bit of theft and scams. Expect a lot of delayed and cancelled flights. In Wamena, your guide will book a car, but some parts of the valley are only accessible by foot. It's medium difficulty trekking, crossing some rivers barefoot, some sketchy sections, but the biggest obstacle you will need to climb is a ladder. Sun and rain are a problem, but both have the same solution, an umbrella. Sun is a much bigger problem. You are high up in the mountains in equatorial sun. If you're not careful, you will get sunburned, even with a high SPF filter. I have never seen sunburns as bad as here. I'm talking entire face swelling up like a beach ball for a few days. Make sure you're protected. If you want to sleep in the villages, bring a sleeping bag. A basic one is sufficient. Sleeping mats are usually provided. There are no mosquitoes in the highlands, so malaria drugs are generally unnecessary. Expect no electricity, bring a power bank, and expect a limited internet coverage. Villages offer drinking water, toilets, and manual showers. Don't expect too much. And please bring some candy for the local children. We ate a lot of hours, still on the airplane, so we had nothing, and the kids are most likely still pissed.